here. I think the slides, I must have left them off, the ones that introduced the top 4 people in the organization here, which are Derek, our lobbyist, Liz, our LAPPB chair.
Yay!
Thank you, Liz.
Deb, our ED, and of course Carolyn, our DPA, our
I'm
stars.
not sure I
But
agree with that.
everyone else, you can see on here, a lot of them.
on that list.
Well, that's why I said you were on the good one with a picture of you,
You know what
but
happens?
someone pulled it from the side.
Right.
So, and other leadership, a lot of the people, I put this in here just to show this is what LAPPB is. It's not just the LAPPB specific people, but it's the leadership. A lot of you guys are on this list because you're doing other stuff for the organization, and that's really critical, including here. So,
Yeah.
this is just a important reminder, especially for those who haven't done this a lot, and I know most of you have, but the whole process of becoming a law is a complicated thing, and every state's different in how they do it, what has to be done. The basics are, though, one person can stop our bill at any time because it has to get introduced in time to where it has a chance to get put onto a committee, and if the chair says, I don't want to put your bill on my committee agenda, then it doesn't get heard. Or if a person of significant influence, like the president of the Senate or the speaker or other people, then it doesn't happen. So last session, we're focused on SIPAC. We got all the way through this to passing 107 to nothing in the House.
Wow.
And we didn't get heard in the Senate just because of other stuff that had nothing to do with our bill. So it didn't get to go to the governor to get signed into law. So that's what we gotta get through again, start from scratch every session.
That governor looks interesting.
And I think that's what it looks like.
They're like, good, Rick Scott more.
And if anyone wants to share examples of these things, please go right ahead. But our strategies, what we're trying to do is establish relationships. We saw that today, as we always do. When we go in to meet with someone, we met with 2 folks today. We met with our bill sponsor in the House, Representative Panchovsky, who has all kinds of connections, and immediately, because Craig is from down there, they have a connection. Deb has a connection because they both were from up in the New England, New Hampshire area, Boston. And so making those connections really is important, and getting to know the assistants, who a lot of us will be meeting with. They oftentimes are more important than the legislators. Being that resource for them, which happens a lot, where they want to know. I've got one of the legislators that I used to meet with who's been out of the House for a while, but every once in a while I still get a phone call from them saying, hey, do you know a psychologist you could recommend for somebody in my family? And always focusing, when we go around about SIPAC, we're talking about the constituents. So it's not, we need this bill because my practice, I'd like to be able to, it has nothing to do with us. I mean, it does, but our focus is on your constituents. When they need help with mental health, it's hard enough to find it and access it already. And now they can't even go out of state to college or wherever and get help. So it's about the constituents. Good to understand the legislative process. So before you meet with someone, it's always nice just to open up your stuff and go, okay, who am I meeting with? What committee are they on? When's the bill going to come before their committee, if at all? And if not, at least I can tell them, hey, last session it made it to the House floor, so you'll probably see it when it gets there. Or, thank you for voting for it already last session on the House floor, if that's the case. So just having a little bit of knowledge is good. You don't have to understand everything. You're a volunteer, you're an expert in psychology, they're not. And with a few exceptions, most of them will recognize that you know more than they do about psychology, and that you can be a resource there and really help. Short notice, things happen quickly. That's why we won't see Deb up in North Carolina during the session. She'll be right here at all times. Carolyn may still be in Charleston or something like that, but that's okay. She can work remotely. If you get a chance to help with the campaigns, that's great, or contribute as an individual. Sometimes the PAC decides we're not giving money. to this candidate for whatever reason, but as an individual, if you want to go do stuff, give them money, put out signs, then great, and have fun. This is fun stuff. We're almost trained to do this kind of work. It's fun work. Always courteous and patient. Brief is also often helpful. As we saw today, we were waiting on Representative Fine, and fortunately, Derek.
I lived a few blocks from him.
Interesting.
This session is being recorded.
Courteous, don't forget.
This session is being recorded. Continue. I'm just letting
No,
you know.
thank you. I'm glad I paused.
We were running a little late there potentially, but fortunately Derek had him on his cell phone, and so he opened right up for us. It was a brief meeting, but it was good. The courteous really is important right now, because as we get so polarized with the politics of it, it's easy for any little comment to be read as a political comment. And we're here for SIPAC and nothing else. So regardless of your political tendencies, cares, concerns, and who you're meeting with the exception that on occasion it is prudent not to meet with someone if you already have an established relationship with them that is not favorable. But the courteous is important, and you never know who's listening when you're in the lunchroom or whatever and talking. Be accurate. A lot of people in politics may not always seem like they're telling you the straight truth. We've got the truth on our side. What we're doing is good, and so just say, but we don't need to exaggerate it or anything. Be accurate. If you don't know, say, that's a good question. Let me get back to you on that. You're not speaking technically on behalf of FPA, even though you are when you're doing the things that FPA is saying to do. But if they ask a question and want to know your opinion, you can't tell them, well, here's what I think, and FPA supports me. The only people that can really talk on behalf of FPA technically are Liz and Deb and Craig, according to our bylaws. Yeah. So again, know the bill number, know the sponsor. They love personal examples. They really do, which was one of the reasons it was great having Michael and Craig with our meetings earlier today, because they have personal examples of why we need SIPAC. I don't have any of those myself, but even if you don't have one from your experience, you can still share those types of examples of people who are impacted by
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, when we were talking with our bill sponsor in the House, we talked about snowbirds, and she had never thought about snowbirds as being an example. She thought students, she thought veterans, but all of a sudden the light went off.
I have a great example where SIPAC made a difference. I had two patients who part of their treatment goal was to move away and launch and get a new job, but part of that was that they couldn't take me with them to facilitate that transition, and that created a lot of hardship for both of those patients to have to start over with treatment while also kind of starting over with this new phase of life.
Perfect example.
All right, you are good. Being the good listener, sometimes just listening, sometimes they do want therapy and they want to know stuff.
Or they pretend they're the therapist.
Sometimes we can invite the representatives to our thing, so when you're back in the district, and if you know a former representative who's now a lobbyist and want to see if they have anyone they want to invite to the meeting, we can do that. Testifying before committee is also a lot of fun. This session, if anyone ends up testifying, probably will just waive in support of the bill because we're not going to take up their time, but sometimes it can have an impact.
And just so folks know, your sponsors are the ones who are going to speak first at a hearing. So, they will introduce the bill, they will field questions. So it's not as if the bill isn't talked about at all. So, we can be there if there's a specific question that they might yield to us. But other than that, we can just say, we waive in support, we won't take up your time to testify.
Yeah, and sometimes they can make it easier on us when we're testifying like when we were testifying on RXP, and Derek was a chairperson and said, okay, the psychiatrists are testifying, I'll make them go first so you can go after them and know how to respond to them. So having those little bits can help out. There may be resistance, handle it like you handle resistance. We're not going to get combative with them. We're going to accept what they have to say. We're going to look into it. We're going to do a good
But we haven't had any resistance on site at all. I mean, from any corridor, from any direction.
We had a slight bit today.
Yeah, fine was a,
I
fine
don't
was a
think-
little bit of a pain in the butt.
I think it's hard to have.
I know that, I have no problem with that.
What was the objection?
It wasn't. It was more
objection the way he handled it.
But his question was, if SciPac passes, does that mean you can recruit patients from out of state and just see people from out of state?
How?
As opposed to this is for your constituents who are leaving the state and need your support and professional guidance. And it was a good question, but his approach was more to say, I'm
Well, he's a
going to
business
challenge this.
person. He exited from a software company. He's an entrepreneur.
But then,
He exited from a software company, so he's thinking about it from a money standpoint, usually everything he does.
but we are constituents as psychologists though, and then others can practice here for 30 days,
Right.
right?
That's
So-
correct.
So it is helping us though too, be able to practice in other states, just like
Yeah.
other psychologists licensed elsewhere practice here.
Yeah. And that is
1,000 of them.
oh, wait,
3,000.
3,000.
But that's under another bill.
A lot of people also call from an outer state that are moving to Florida, so I see a lot of kids, and so families call because they know they're transitioning to Florida in advance. So they try to get their diagnosis and
Mhm.
stuff for their care, so when they move to Orlando, then they'll already have their IEP and stuff. So it's that way, so that'd be another way to look at it, that
Mhm.
once they move here and relocate, which Florida's having huge migration, during the pandemic,
Yeah.
you'd want your constituents to be in good health when they arrive.
Yes. So,
There are also some clients who are not appropriate for telehealth, and so I indicated that it's still within the scope of our ethical guidelines. We have to establish that the person is in fact an appropriate candidate for that type of intervention.
very good. We can provide them the Discuss Constituents brochure, not this, but the brochure, which is really great, and most of you have given them out, and they're really appreciated. We can't give them any other, thank you, Liz. Can't give them other gifts per se, but that's a resource. Again. Okay, just our goals, and we've had these for a while now. We've gotten a lot of input from FPA members too, but what are we in this for? We're wanting to increase opportunities for practice, which telehealth does, and we're wanting to be fairly compensated. Medicaid's another issue that came up today with Representative Vanchovsky, and something to address. It's been a long-standing issue. So that we want to do. We want to protect the practice and title of psychology, but when you're meeting tomorrow, it's the telehealth. What is LAPPB? I think maybe we're going to get into our slides that I had mixed up order. So this is what we're covering today anyway. We've already covered LAPPB and effective advocacy and legislative priorities. So we'll get into some of the stuff that we've done fairly quickly and key legislators. All right. So our goals: prescriptive authority, not happening. We don't even need to bring it up. It's not this session. That's for another time. So mental health services, diversity, inclusion. There's a lot of social justice stuff that FPA supports. We're not bringing that up. Not the issue. So that's not what we're doing. So RXP, skip right over that. This one I like just because the slide, just because it points out that we did have a staff analysis of our RXP bill, and it's always nice when you get that, because then you can point to something that was done by the legislative staff and say, hey, this points out some of the issues that that we have to deal with that are good. We've not had any analysis of SIPAC, have we?
No.
No. So,
So analysis happens when they don't wanna do it and they're putting you off by promising to do an analysis.
kind of like OPAGA,
Uh-huh.
they do that.
Exactly.
Well, no, the staff
That's
analysis
exactly
isn't gonna
what it
happen
is.
until they know the bill's going to committee. Right there?
Yeah, Andy's talking about the OPACA
No,
analysis.
this was the
Oh.
staff analysis I was talking about.
Oh,
Just
that
the
was
basic
OPAGA,
Staff
okay.
bill, yeah, this was not
Yeah.
OPAGA, although we did have an OPAGA.
No, we had a staff analysis on site pack
We
last year,
did.
the house,
Just
on
did
the
we?
house side, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the bill moved in the house.
Yeah, was there anything in that we should
No.
Just
use?
spoke, it just spoke to the numbers.
And it doesn't, it's not gonna
Yeah.
cost any money, so there's no
Yeah.
fiscal impact,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Are we gonna talk about that narrative about last year and how we're gonna spin that this year?
Which narrative?
What it is for the House and didn't in the
Yeah,
Senate?
we have to talk
Yeah.
about it today in committee, I mean, to the members, so it's actually to Randy Fine. I mean,
Yeah.
truth of the matter is, so the bill passed unanimously in the House last year, I mean, every committee stopped, and on the floor, with not one nay vote. We even had groups stand up, like American for Prosperity actually stood up in support of the bill,
Wow.
in every stop.
We don't know why.
They have a big mental health initiative,
Uh-huh.
and they just, actually, they reached out to me already and saying they're gonna support again this year.
Excellent.
There was no concerns about SIPAC in the Senate. What happened was health policy had over 100 bills referred to it, and we actually were slated to for a particular week to be heard. The week prior to health policy, they had abortion on the agenda.
Right.
And that abortion debate did not conclude in that meeting, so they bumped to the next meeting. Every bill got pushed back an additional week. The challenge was, as they got through abortion, the decision was made not to meet anymore in health policy. So every bill that was waiting got held off. And I was trying, the House sponsor was trying, we all were trying to, I mean, our bill was up and down, in 4 minutes, 4 to
Yeah.
5 minutes easily when the bill comes up. No opposition, no
We
question.
did have opposition. We had the idiots that ranted about Big Pharma.
Yeah, that's right,
The
yeah.
attendees of Big
Yeah.
Pharma, but they said we're so crazy on the face of it, nobody paid any
Exactly, I
attention.
forgot about that.
See, Derek even
Yeah, I
forgot
forgot- I did
that.
think about that.
I know, because on the face of it, they were just, yeah.
Yeah. So we did mention last year, and actually Randy Fine recalled it. So Randy Fine, this is important to know. So in the prior 2 years, he's been in the education space.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is his first dealing in healthcare. He's the big chair of healthcare. So the two subject committees report up to him. So we're a little bit of educating him today, as well as making him aware, listen, this bill will come to you. We have him on record voting for the bill last year. He was a supportive vote last year. Kudos to Deb, because Deb has history, and so she decided I'm not going to the meeting. Self-aware.
And to Derek for pointing out to the representative that he had voted for the bill
Yes,
last
he
year,
voted for it
but
last
in a very low-key
Correct.
manner.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. And tell remember this: we actually his staff, the staff that he inherited, actually played a role in the off season with us getting SIPAC ready. Krista Calamus and that team actually helped us out. They had some questions initially. We were able to answer those questions. We actually did a virtual with those guys and answered a lot of their questions. And so, from a staff's perspective, everything that needs to be addressed has been addressed. So, again, I think that's important. There's one other thing I want to make mention here, and I'm not taking over Andy's presentation. I think it's important. There's 120 House members. Almost 81 of them are freshmen and sophomores.
Okay,
It's amazing.
So just think about that. You have a lot of youth and immaturity in there, right? And so that's Democrat and Republican. 81 of juniors, of freshmen and sophomore. So there's a lot of people who never heard of SIPAC and never voted on SIPAC. That does not change the talking point. This bill passed the House unanimously. I think that's important. Still want to mention that, although they didn't vote on it. Still want to mention it. I think it's also important that the bill is bipartisan sponsored. We have a Democrat in the House and a Republican in the Senate, the same sponsors from last year. And I think that's also important. And the bill last year was voted unanimously as a bipartisan bill as well. I think all those things are very important. In case you get that member or two who's just asking certain things. Again, the slowdown in the Senate wasn't our doing. And kudos to now Senate President Kathleen Pasadomo. She committed to us when our bill didn't get heard that she would make sure the bill got heard this upcoming year. She was apologetic. Abortion bill got so toxic, it just ran out of time. But she made a commitment, and she's kept her word. She's keeping her word, I should say. So I just think that's important.
Is there any difference in introducing this idea of SIPAC to a new senator versus a new rep?
I don't think so.
Not really. I mean, you know, a couple more points is last year they passed an interstate compact
Yeah.
for the counselors.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they've had an interstate compact for nurses
nurses.
forever.
Right.
Okay, here we go.
And physical therapists, that was the first.
What?
Physical therapist was the first.
Actually, they have a bill pending this year.
Mhm.
I didn't read it carefully. Maybe they're changing what they've got. So, you know, there's precedent in mental health and they've given it to less qualified and less trained people already as of last year. So, you know, I don't think there's a difference.
Yeah, I was
And call it an interstate compact instead of
actually, Andy
SIPAC.
said that today.
Yeah, call it an interstate compact, because everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what SIPAC is.
Yeah, and I would say two other things I think is important. The brochure that you all have, the data's in there, right? I think that's the reader friendly document.
What are we up to, 26?
It was 35,
36?
and 2 pending.
And 2 more.
I was listening, you said today, and 2 pending. So I think that's important that the numbers are in there, right? And you know, draw their attention to it. I think that's very, very important. They understand that.
That if we join,
It'll be
it,
36.
it'll be 36, and that triggers it, doesn't it?
Oh, it's already triggered.
Okay, it's already
It's already in
triggered.
place, yeah.
Years.
Actually, we'll be 38, wouldn't we? 'Cause there's 2
Well,
more
once those
coming.
other
There's
2 go, yeah,
37.
there'll be 38, and then there are 5 or 6 others that,
Yeah.
Yeah,
are
there's already a
looking at it for
certification in place.
Yeah,
with,
okay.
It's gonna be over 40 by this summer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I think is important, we talked about this when we talked to Randy Fine, is, I can't remember what year it was, maybe it was 2017, Florida passed telehealth bill,
2019.
2019.
39,
And
yeah.
we swear by that bill. And actually, this same healthcare staff was behind that bill. And that was our initial discussion when we had, Carolyn was talking to the house staff, where they were concerned, and we know what SIPAC was going to do in comparison to the telehealth bill. And I think it's important when talking about the telehealth bill, what it actually does is it helps out of state
Right,
come in our state.
Right.
And while that's great, it doesn't help us.
No, it hurts
Right,
us.
and so I think that's important.
Yeah.
You get down to that point. We had a discussion there with Randy Fine and making sure they understood that this is while that may be great, it didn't help us out at all. And I think that's
Right.
very, very critically important in that regard when we have that conversation. Because again, what I would tell you is don't be disappointed, don't get frustrated, and don't feel like you're wasting your time when you realize you're speaking to members who literally are brand new here.
Right.
And they have no idea at all. I mean, this is their first real meeting probably with anybody, and so it's a lot of them around, a lot of youth in that regard. But the bipartisan sponsorship is very important. That goes a long way. Unanimous vote goes a long way. Once I mentioned the members who got held up behind abortion last year, they're like, "Oh, I get it." They all remember last year's abortion, right? They remember how hostile it was, and so they're like, "I get it." But it's not an issue with our bill at all. I think that's important.
Can I ask a question?
And then one last thing, I'm sorry. And so then Liz had a great situation today with Randy Fine, interestingly, because Liz actually met Randy Fine's father
Yeah.
while on the beach picking up litter from beach visitors, and so she met the dad, and that meant a lot to him actually. So
Go Liz.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell him if he doesn't do what we want, we'll tell his dad.
That's a good
Pick
idea.
on his trash.
So
I
my
know.
question is, in the past, part of our job when we've been here has been to ask for co-sponsors. Do we
Yes.
wanna do that?
You can.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think that's important. So you can ask the members you meet with, or their meet their aides, who actually co-sponsor. And what that simply is the sponsors are who they are. They actually can submit a letter or make a call to the leadership's office. I want to be on as co-sponsor. We've done that, and then in a matter of minutes to an hour, their name now it shows up as a co-sponsor of our bill. It's really what it is. So it's not just them telling you in the meeting I support you. It has to be a co-sponsor. Now when you pull up that bill in the future, it shows a sponsor as Harold Hunchowski and a list of co-sponsors. These members like to have their name associated with it. So don't be afraid to ask that as well. That's a great point.
And they can do unlimited
Unlimited.
sponsorship.
Yeah, they all can be co-sponsors.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
one of them can.
And they like doing that if it's something
Yes.
they're invested in, especially if they're invested in healthcare issues at all.
But does that make Does that cause a lot more work for them though? Too?
No.
A lot, no?
No, they don't do anything.
They don't even show up.
They just get the name, they just get the
Yeah.
name.
They
published.
don't
It's just a
They
blue
just want
star.
credit.
Free credit.
They want credit.
They want credit.
Based on
Right.
their personality,
Yeah.
a few of them might do it just based on
Well,
knowing.
a lot of them will do it for that reason. There's no credit. We had today actually we met with Hunchowski. What we talked about in our prep meeting is when you
Sorry,
meet
I
with
lived in
members,
Brevard for.
you know,
on and off.
it's also okay to ask for a picture. Actually take a picture with them. Actually today we didn't have a chance.
Great picture
Hunchowski
on
asked for a
Facebook.
picture.
I don't know if anybody's
It's on the
saw
Facebook,
that.
yeah, I saw
Yeah.
it.
Good picture, Derek.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But she asked for it, right?
Yeah,
And
why
so
weren't you in the picture?
I was a cameraman.
Oh.
Well, we should have given them camera credit.
Yeah.
But my point is when you're meeting with them, you know, some of them they love taking pictures because
Yeah.
if you put it on social media, they just want you to tag them. If you put it on Twitter, sometimes they'll insert it in their own newsletters. We may mention that it was going to be in our newsletter, and all she says it make me look good, and I think something like that. What she said. But there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
It's asking to get a picture with them, and sometimes the aide will come in and take the picture.
Just send them to us.
Yeah,
Again,
make
going along
sure
with
you
their
send
mindset,
them
right?
to
They like to be
them.
seen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
so.
sure.
Good stuff. So yeah, there's old stuff about the Telehealth Advisory Council. Michael was involved in that way back, and they passed the bill that lets psychologists come in. These are the basics, but really, I didn't put it all in the slides. This is where it's at. This is what you need to know. It's all in here. This is what we're sharing. These are the key points, why this is a good thing. If they have any questions, they know who they can go to. It answers some of the quick things. How does SIPAC differ from this bill? Would it allow psychologists to continue seeing their patients in other states? Just, take a look at this before you meet with them, and this is really what we're trying to get across. So that's our thing, and it is beautiful. So we're gonna zip through some of these slides pretty quickly. This is just showing we did a lot of stuff. We always are doing stuff behind the scenes. There's the Florida Association of School Psychologists that's wanting to meet with us again. There's the Florida Psychiatric Society that we work closely with and agree with on many things, so they can be our friends too. They don't have to, they support SIPAC. Yep. And then you can see, we've had a lot of bills that have passed that we've had some influence in, which is why some of these are here. They're not our bill, but we were able to say, hey, either it needs to be tweaked a bit to recognize what is a Chapter 490 psychologist. How do we make sure that bad parts of the bill disappear? So that was obviously a very important one. This is just showing some of our bills, what happened to them. Even RXP passed two committees, and then it died in Health and Human Services, and that was a while back. And you can see the numbers on these bills. They're in the 1500s and 300s and these high numbers. We're bill 3335 and 5658. Those are, we got them in quick. These are low bills. These are priority bills. Again, some stuff that we may like gets signed into law. Some of it doesn't. This is the mandatory reporting, where Carolyn had a lot of work to do on that as well to make sure they understood that it shouldn't be that we have to mandatorily contact the potential victim and tell them about that. That's police that do that part of it. So the warning, initially, that's the way they had it written. So here's the telehealth bill. We can skip through that. There's a list of all of who the LAPPB people are. This is just to point out another reason. It's not that we didn't have a great effort with SIPAC last year. It's that only 5% of bills get passed because of all those little things that get in the way.
Wow.
This is just to show you.
Is it different? I'm just curious. I don't know, people that have been doing this long time. Is it getting lower over the last, since the pandemic?
It goes up and down a little bit.
With
What
all
would you
the
say,
culture
Derek? It's
wars
usually around
in Florida?
6% that pass. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
so last year we had about 3,300 bills filed. About 300 or so actually make it through House and to the governor, and that doesn't factor in with vetoes, right? I mean, a lot of things get filed that never make it through for whatever reason it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and you add to that now with supermajority in the House and Senate, right? I mean, if you're a Democrat, especially in the House, and you're filing a bill, you're just wasting bill slots, probably more likely. They're probably never gonna hear your bill.
Mm-hmm.
But you have the right to file bills. It's just, it's one of those scenarios.
That's why I was
but-
curious, is there a way to know like Florida versus, you know, we're already 38th on SciPac, so just curious if we know our percent legislation versus like maybe like Massachusetts, which is
I don't
a
know,
little
but
more.
New Hampshire,
Yeah.
Do like
it's
state
fascinating
psych
to do.
associations tell us
It's
this
really
stuff?
hard to, they're apples and oranges because they have different rules. So, you know, there are some states where every bill gets a hearing. Now here, that's not the case. The power is totally vested in the House and Senate leadership as to whether bills have a hearing or not.
Okay.
So, you know, so just the very fact that all of these get weeded out has an impact, you know, but if you have states that you hear them all, then it looks differently, and so people are not just gonna put things in that they know maybe don't have a chance in hell because they have to have a hearing, they've gotta go through all of that work.
Right.
So, and then some states have limits on legislators on how many bills they can file. Other states don't, some have them in the Senate and some have them in the House. I mean, every state is different, so it's kinda hard to compare them.
Okay. It sounds like it might look like equal because everyone has a right to do it, but at the end,
They have
It's
no power,
very
you have no
low.
power, it never
Yeah.
goes anywhere.
interesting.
And you also have an extremely short process here, you know, you don't have enough time. You know, there are some states you go to and the actual legislative process makes a difference. So you have a hearing, you bring in individuals testifying, there's a concerted effort to pass a bill. In my mind, almost every bill in Florida is pretty much teed up beforehand, and you know where it's gonna go. I mean,
How many states require hearings?
I don't know off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
so
It's
some
very
states, like
small.
we're different because some states don't even do committee weeks, right?
Yeah.
They just do session, right? For example, like Texas, they actually, when they vote on their budget, they vote for a 2-year budget.
Yeah, they only meet every other year.
Yeah, and so, you know, for us, we do we say we do 60 days, consecutive days, but we don't factor in the committee weeks, right? So we're really, like, we're doing 7 committee weeks as our first session begins, which is very, very different, right? We also, I mean, you, as a legislator, you make about $29,500. They deem ourselves a part-time legislature. It's really not part-time.
Yeah.
But you'll be interested. There are several states that look at us as a model, though.
Interesting.
But she
How
makes
long do they have to process that? Like
All depends.
yeah, like the SciPac.
Different, you know, different states have different lengths of session. So, you know, when I would work in Wyoming, one year it was a 30-day session, and the year of the budget it was a 45-day session. And the reason they were so short is they had to get all those ranchers back. So they would literally come to Cheyenne for the month of the 30 days and get it done, you know. But then I worked in New Hampshire where we started right after New Year's Day and we finished almost up until the start of the new fiscal year, July 1.
And in
And
Florida,
here-
our constitution requires, only thing they have to do in session is pass a balanced budget.
Okay.
Everything else is just icing on the cake. They don't have to pass any bills at all. You have to pass a balanced budget. The fiscal year ends June 30th.
Okay.
And so everything else, if you ever come up here and you're sitting in the gallery and you're watching them, your stomach may turn, right? Because you're trying to figure out, what are you getting done down there, right? 'Cause most times people are yelling across each other, nobody's focusing and things of that nature, but they have to get a budget done. And so like probably it's 9 weeks of session. So we start March 7th, it ends May 5th. Usually the last 3 weeks of session we really get serious. That's where you try to talk about budget in that regard. So ultimately the goal is always to get your policy bills up early and get them moving, because as session gets toward the end, if you're still hanging out there,
Oh.
you're really in trouble.
Because they have to focus on the
They,
money.
yeah, and then here's the thing though. I mean, but to the point that Deb makes, I mean, big policy items, you know, when those things drop. For example, like this Thursday, the Senate President's #1 priority, affordable housing, is dropping this Thursday. You know, for the most part, that bill, when it drops, it'll look a little different when it finishes at the end of session. It'll be a little different. It won't be a lot of changes. And then the members are basically told, right? If Liz is a member, I tell Liz, if I'm a speaker, I tell her how she needs to vote. And if she goes against what I tell her to do, not only do I take her committee chairmanship from her, I'm gonna send her to the back row. Like there's some usually they just follow along with things. It's a lot different in the Senate. The Senate is way more collegial. Every senator matters, Democrat or Republican. In the House, it's very top down, very top down. And so members come up here for the first time as freshmen who are really excited and they go with a world mentality and they run for office. Catch them after their first 1 or 2 sessions. They're like, I don't know if I can do this. I had good members who ended up not finishing and running again for re-election because they just couldn't do it anymore because they don't know how to explain to their constituents back in the district why they're not bringing anything home. But the fact of the matter is because they got up here and they were told, I mean, I'm talking about like in this room like this, they bring them in the room
Line them up.
and the majority would tell them, here are the bills. Here's how we're voting. If you cannot vote this way, you need to meet with us beforehand and tell us you can't, tell us why you can't. And if you don't tell us, right, then we expect you to vote this way. You know that when that goes on a board and Deb's name come up, it's supposed to be a green and she's a red. Before Deb gets back to her seat, she will be summoned into a room and she will be handled. And that's really how it works, right? And so, because behind the scenes, everything is being worked out.
And you also need to remember that we have, local projects that I think is the worst thing ever. Because local legislators put in money that goes back to the district. And so if you go up against somebody and don't vote the way they want to, guess what? Your local project is out. And then you can also see sometimes when, like on the Democratic side, where someone's capitulated, and all of a sudden they're bringing the big bucks back to their city. I mean, it is, that's what it is.
If we have a gathering momentum, and the wind is at our back, and
We'll be fine.
when might this come across? I mean, how early in the session?
So this is the last committee week for January. We have 3 consecutive committee weeks in February. So we're looking at February 6th, 13th, and 20th. And so we are working to get our bill heard on both sides, House and Senate, the week of the 6th.
Okay.
In the first committee.
In the first committee.
First committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
The ultimate goal when we first set out was to try to get 1, if not 2 committee hearings during committee week. So when session began, we're so far ahead of everybody else. That's why you filed the bill early.
Yeah.
Right. And so the problem has been thus far, they just haven't heard a lot of bills in committee. There's been a lot of presentations. It's not a lack of effort or ask. And so that's the goal is the week of February 6th to get the bill heard in the first committees on both sides. Now the great thing is our Senate sponsor, Gail Harrell, she's also the chair of the second committee of her bill, of both bills. And so once we get to the first stop, and Colleen Burton, who's the chair of the first stop in the Senate, she voted for the bill last year. She was in the House. So it's not going to be a concern in that regard. But that first meeting matters. That first hearing matters. And once they see that there is no concern, everybody loves this bill, you get heard even faster after that.
That's what I was gonna ask. How long from the first hearing does it usually take for it to
So
pass?
if the bill comes up and there's no amendments, right? There's no changes to the bill, you can actually be working to get heard the very next week. If there's an amendment filed, it can slow things down to at least 2 weeks or so.
Okay.
Because our bill has no fiscal impact, and there's
So it
no.
might pass by the 20th then, 2 weeks from the 6th.
Yeah, so I mean, we could be up. If we look at the 6th, whatever day of the week that they actually meet both committees. The goal would be to try to be back up the week of the 20th. I say that because the week of the 13th is usually the appropriations week, where they're trying to roll out budget allocations on both sides. You're trying to put back up the week of the 20th, and if that works out, then we would basically be holding off until session begins in March the 7th. I'm very comfortable with the belief that we'll have our bills heard on both sides at least once in the month of February.
And there will be no amendments to our bill because it's an interstate compact, so it has to be.
And that's the other thing about that. They know that it can't change from how it gets filed, so we're not worried about any
Why is
amendments. And
that?
that's
I'm sorry.
very important. Yeah, we have.
Why is that again?
Because it's an interstate compact, it has to be the same in every state
Oh,
that passes it.
okay.
So we can't change it, which is why we have the
makes it easier
secondary
for
bill,
them
just
then.
to clean up the language within the state of Florida so that we get by the records exemptions, but the main bill has to be identical.
And what we'll be doing is, as soon as we know things are happening, I'll send out a notice to the listserv. But if Derek's Derek's job is to get these things heard.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing right, that's his
Right.
big deal right
Yeah.
now.
Would it be accurate to say that in the past, the fact that it was an interstate compact that could not be altered by the local legislators was one of the sticking points? Because a lot of legislators like to have their fingerprints on these bills. So it's meaningless, it's just a pass-through process for them. So, I think there's been enough change as a result of COVID and the implementation of this in 35 other states, that now they realize they have to catch up.
Yeah. And that's a good point. That really is a good point. One thing Florida hates, Florida Republicans especially, is hate to not be in a leadership role, right? We're really told that we're 30-something states behind, right? That's really, you are hitting the ego.
And
Normally we can go ahead.
Yeah, and which is why we've got on here that it's already passed in Georgia, North
Yeah,
Carolina,
there
and
you go.
Texas.
Yeah.
Local conservative states that
Yeah.
they compete with.
And that matters. Like Florida, never. We always hate to be behind Texas on anything. But those states were listed on purpose because we normally lead all Georgia and North Carolina. We used to compete with Texas, and we're not. And I think that really does matter.
So we will get a picture of everyone at our lunch, tomorrow,
That is
so
the Governor's Club right there. We'll be eating on the balcony
Yeah.
out there.
we'll have a beautiful, outdoor background.
Fading away.
Do all of you know how to track legislation on myfloridahouse.gov?
No.
You can select the bill number and it will show you what the activity has been on it.
Oh, cool.
And if you check on the committees, it'll also tell you the schedule and the agenda for the committees. So we can keep tracking these things
Yeah.
in real time once you get back to your.
And then and what he's talking about on that website also, if you're tracking committees, there's a broadcast icon on each committee page. You actually can watch the committee live as it's taking place as well. Yeah.
And you can sign up with the trackers they have, and they will just automatically tell you anything that happens with that bill or that committee or that legislation.
Yeah, and if any of you want to do that and have any trouble figuring it out, just call me, because that's how I track all our bills.
I just wait till Derek tells us.
I tried to beat Carolyn.
I try to beat Carolyn.
I had an email ready to go, and it came in. I was like, crap.
I told him that's what I live for.
I literally had it ready. I had it ready too.
We can skip through this too. They're just showing again what happened in 2020 with SIPAC or with the RXP. So that there was SIPAC, and we tried to get through just some other bills that have been of reference, many of which don't move anywhere in committee, like insurance parity. So this talks about our mission with LAPPB, and it is really scope of practice and quality mental health services. Those are the things we're trying to do. We can probably skip over that and some of the other bills. Skip past that. Here we go. So, up there, just one back. The one on the side there. Yeah, that one. So this is just showing what we did, and that it passed 107 to nothing because it passed all of the committees by Representative Wachowski, and she's determined to do that again this session. And then the next slide shows in the Senate where we just got held up. We were ready to go to the Health Policy Committee, and then the whole abortion debate thing kept us from getting there. So we're essentially doing the same thing this session. Some of the committees' names have changed, but it's the same sort of process. All right, next, I think we're getting close to them. This is just letting you know there are other bills out there that we've paid attention to. This session, we're not gonna worry about whatever those bills are, conversion therapy or anything. We're not gonna say, oh, and by the way, here's how we feel about these bills. Just like that. Pictures. All right.
Well, that's an old.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, Liz.
I
I
don't
think
look
that's
like
the same
that
one from the
anymore, people.
newsletter.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
an old.
So we can skip past that. So here we go. Here, Healthcare Regulation Subcommittee. That's this session. That's where we're at. that's the first committee of reference. So that's what we're going for. Those are the other two committees that the House Bill 35 is on this ethics, elections, and open government because it's just a slightly different bill being in the public records part. But amazingly, 56 and 58 in the Senate are going to the exact same three committees, all three of them. And then I just wanted to point out some of the legislators that are important here. So Jeff Brandes has termed out, but he was my senator and he sponsored SIPAC for us for a long time. And he always did what he thought was right. So even though he was a Republican and he still voted against the Don't Say Gay bill, even though the Republicans said we're voting for this bill, and he said, no, I'm
Well,
not.
he had already gone to the woodshed, so he
Yeah.
could do what he wanted, so.
They said
He was on his way out.
Yeah.
But he always did that. He would always vote his mind. So there are people out there who will do that, and on this bill, it really is bipartisan. It's all about mental health, and they're all on board with it. Next, please. So here are the two big wigs that run the whole show. And Derek had mentioned Senator Pasadomo and her support for us for this session. And I guess Representative Speaker Renner voted for us last session already too, but they don't get into the committee stuff so much. And of course our former mayor of Parkland, Representative Franchovsky, who, when we visited her today, I was amazed. She has a really nice office in a nice place. Like, how did a Democrat get this office? But clearly, and Derek knows better than I do, but I think it's just, she does good stuff.
And you also have to know Christine, she gets what she wants.
Yeah. But I was, in her defense, Deb made a comment earlier. I will say about Konchowski. So last year, I was looking for a sponsor for SIPAC.
Yeah, why did you pick
I
her?
called the majority office, House Majority Office, which is basically the Republicans, and I said, listen, I need a good member, and I don't want a freshman, I don't want somebody who's not gonna work hard, and they have a list of members that they have on their list who still have bill slots available, who they believe are good members, and they even have a list where they have Democrats on there with a green light, and they had her on the list, and they said, listen, we like her, she works really hard, she doesn't throw flame, like she's gonna put the work in. And so they gave me her number, I called her and we met up and I talked her through it. And she's like, I want it. And we got filed. And I will tell you, I work with a lot of members at Lunch Series doing this. Hands down, she works. And the members do like her. She's not gonna bend over and none of that. Like, she really will press the point, but she put work in. Of her 7 bills she filed last year, 5 of them made it to the floor.
Nice.
Right, she's passing really good bills. She's heavily involved in mental health and military. Craig knows her, right? Cause she was mayor of the city of Parkland, and all things happened that Valentine's Day. But she works really, really hard and does right by. She also gets to the podium. She doesn't inflate the facts. Like, she's gonna speak to what it is, and she's gonna stop when she's done. And, but she really does it. And also she goes and meets with the members of the committee before the meeting, which is very, very challenging with some members. So I try to make sure I touch every member on the committee before our bill comes up. You very rarely have a sponsor of a bill that does that as well. They may talk like the chair and the vice chair. She goes to every member on the committee, literally every last one of them, to answer any of their questions, which actually helps out a great deal. And so majority office actually recommended I use her, and I was hesitant at first, only because sometimes when they give you a Democrat, it's a message of, we hate the bill, we're gonna kill it.
Right.
And it wasn't that. They literally, she proved to live up to it. She works really, really hard. Very, very honest. So when the bill didn't pass last year, she called me to her office and she said, listen, in the House, they give you a deadline, you can file your first 2 bills early. Your first 2 priority bills. She said, it's my number 1 bill next session, in this session. I'm filing it early, and we're gonna get it done. And I said, okay. And literally that's what she did. She filed it early, and she worked members over, talked to the speaker as he was coming in. She's done everything I need a member to do. she's kept her word, and she's very committed to the cause altogether. But I think very hard. She did, and let me tell you, the last thing I'll give to her is it was not a quid pro quo. She did not call me asking for money on her campaign. She didn't say I did this for you. None of that ever happened. Not one time did she ever call me and say, give me money, because none of that ever happened. And I appreciate that, because sometimes on this side of the work that I do, a member will remind you, right? It could be a simple vote of a yes in a committee. They're going to call you and say, well, I voted for that bill. I need more than that. But she never did that. Not one time. And because she really just believes in SciPac. And she proved that today in our meeting. I mean, she was very passionate about why she's behind it. That really does matter. Well, it was Gail Harrow, who's our Senate sponsor. She
Next
likes
slide,
it.
please.
You're being recorded.
Oh, I think we skipped one. Oh no, senators are later. Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, Gail Harrow, who's our Senate sponsor. And this is I can say this because she's right there. So she's our Senate sponsor, right? And she really likes SciPac, but man, she hates RXP.
Well, he's a physician.
Yeah.
Well, he passed away. Yeah, but he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she does not like it at all. So when I called her, we asked her to be the sponsor of SciPac, and she loves interstate compacts. She was like, I'll do it under one condition. I was like, what is that? She was like, it can have no scent of scope in the bill. She's just anti-scope. And the years we tried to do with RFP, she was the chair of the first committee, and she would never hear the bill. And when Brandis would approach her, she would not hear the bill at all. And she just never moved. That was on any scope bill. If FMA hated a bill, she just never heard the bill. And I can say that on record, because she actually would say that to you. That she just, if they oppose it, she
It wasn't just us.
it was not just us. She also wears red every day. In case you didn't know that. She knows wear red.
Does it help her, or her, I was gonna ask about, like, cause I use Twitter a lot, to, like, I'm with Escamani, that's the district I'm in, right? So that, like, kind of,
Gail, Harold, Escamani.
right, yeah, so does it hurt if you tweet someone, like, if I go to Escamani's tomorrow, then you don't want certain people to see where, you know what I mean, who you affiliate with or that you support?
No, I mean, on our bill,
Cause they are all on Twitter, like
Yeah.
last year I went to Huchowski and I liked them, and then I added them, and then within like 2 hours she, responded, so there, a lot of them are on Twitter.
yeah, I mean, listen, so on our bill, if you use with Escamani staff supported, which she voted for last year, and you do that on Twitter, nothing wrong with that,
Yeah,
right? I mean, because she's on the record voting for it.
yeah,
And so, like last year, she actually voted for the tax package, right? Which would, I mean, she's got a standing ovation. Everybody was surprised that she did it. So there's nothing wrong with that at all, because it's about our issue, right? We're not getting involved in anything else other than SciPac.
yeah,
And I would say that if you meet with a member, right, I would say on social media and say, I want to thank whomever
right,
for their support of SciPac. They love that, right?
Yeah.
They're going to retweet that,
yeah.
right? That matters to them. So there would be nothing wrong with that.
Can we go back a couple slides just to capture those?
How to go back.
There we go. So Representative Garrison was going to talk to you after,
Actually,
so we
he's
have a
gonna be
meeting
with
set up.
Justin.
Yeah. So that was good. One of the
Really good guy.
northeast Jacksonville area folks.
So him and Jen Bradley and Rob Bradley, they're law partners
Oh,
in Clay County area. He's a really good guy. He'll be speaker in 4 years, but he's a really good guy.
So that's the healthcare approach chair, which sometimes in those meetings are like, why are we here? There's no money to
Yeah.
appropriate for this
Yeah.
bill. But
Correct.
anyway, and then Representative Chuck Clemens, who's the healthcare regulation chair. So that's our first stop.
He's also speaker pro tem, so he's number 2. So I remember having Paul Renner, he'll be next in line.
So there's Randy Fine that we already met with. He's
No
a
bad
good
thing.
committee. And then we're gonna meet also with Representative Fernandez Barquin, who is just seeing 35 and not 33, because 35 is going to his committee. So those are the folks there, and then the Senate.
Look at those.
Bill
We grew
leaders.
up.
I was gonna say,
Like little
you're 21.
What's it called, the old ones?
I did kids, I know kids.
Relationship is
That's
everything.
funny.
Those kids.
Aw.
Never gonna live this down, guys.
So there's our other key Senate legislators. Colleen Burton has been a friend of Derek's and good to FPA for a long time. And that's our first stop there. And then the fiscal policy is Travis Hudson, who Chris Rosilli and I had met with him to try and get him to be on board with RXP. That was a long time ago. But he seems somewhat open at the time. So those are our key folks. I think that's about it. Oh, well, of course, finally it has to be signed by the governor.
Right.
So we don't want to do anything that would prevent that from happening. And then this just points out that we should give more to the political committee. So, yeah, there are a lot of folks up here that I haven't even heard of that have given more money. The American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics contributes more than psychologists do. But that's at the national.
Do we send that to FPA members?
Right, yeah.
Do we send that to our members? See,
It's really
We
good.
have in the
In the
past.
past.
I've never seen them.
Yes,
It's really important to show numbers.
What was
Yeah,
that?
and that's national. I mean,
You said relationship is everything? Oh, no.
I mean, keep being cheap, you're gonna keep getting,
It's right.
all the struggle.
Absolutely.
How many of us are in NPA now?
1100 and change.
And how many licenses do we think are in the state?
over
Alright.
6,000.
6,000 now?
6,000.
We're losing ground.
We maintain that 17 to 21% for
Okay.
a few years.
Good.
Hey, we're not losing.
We're not losing.
Good.
We're not
We're
losing.
not grading
Good.
either.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
$10.
I think that when we pass SIPOC, I think Deborah needs to do a postcard to go to every licensed
Absolutely.
psychologist.
Look what we
that
did.
says
Is this
SIPOC
something that
is
could
passed,
happen with
You're
the
welcome.
Yes, you're welcome. That's perfect.
Thank you for your contributions.
Is this automatic when you pay your membership? Is there like a pop-up or something to give?
Yeah. But, yeah, it's there.
When you pay your dues?
Yeah, for the
He
pack,
knows
yeah.
that better than I do.
Like right on that site
Yeah,
or something?
it's on the, the,
Like
you
add
can
10
add in the
bucks
pack
or something.
amounts, yeah.
Yep. You can add it just like you do the divisions.
Okay, I think that's it. Other comments, questions?